Welcome back to another episode of the Soapbox Business Show. I am your host, Mario Busto, alongside
Zachary Newton. Welcome.
All right. This one's a bit different, guys. We're actually recording this intro after the fact because we had a unique opportunity to do a one-on-one interview with a very well-known, accredited Formula One photographer, journalist, YouTuber, and TikToker, but that feels weird saying in that order.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've mentioned on this show, and I probably have at this point. I just lose track of things that I've said. I got hooked on Formula One after watching the Netflix series Drive to Survive this year, and so this is my first official year as a Formula One fan. F1 is probably the most competitive professional driving sport in the world. And for those who are completely unknown to the sport or just have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, Zach's kind of in that camp at the moment. I've been telling
a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I don't even think I've said the name of our guest, but his name is Kim Illman, and he's been shooting photography for F1 since 2018 or 2017, I think he tells me.
I think it was 17.
Yeah, he started towards the end of 2017 or wasn't doing it full time yet in 2017 that I'm aware of. And from there, he transitioned to creating really unique content on YouTube that focused not necessarily on the technical side of the cars, but rather taking the approach that propelled F1 into global fame, at least United States fame, which was that Netflix series. Because Formula One is huge in Europe. It's been huge in Europe. It didn't need the Netflix series for that, but as far as in the States and amongst where we are in Florida, I had never seen anybody interested in this sport until that series came out. So it was cool talking to Kim, who I discovered his YouTube content in around July or June, right before I went on vacation, because I was starved for good quality F1 content in between races. And I was also learning more about the sport, trying to keep up with it the way I do football and basketball. It's gotten into that place for me. Nice. of fandom. So it was a really awesome conversation with him, very insightful. He talks about his journey as a photographer, how he got to where he is, how I guess what's the word I would look for? There's not many F1 photographers or people doing what he specifically does.
No.
And essentially some stuff that I kind of took as an excuse to ask him F1 questions I wanted to ask, like who's most likely to run for president amongst the F1 drivers, and who's most likable in the paddock, and which team does he have the best relationships with, and all sorts of things. He even tells a story about Pierre Gasly, which was interesting, where he FaceTimed his son, which was hilarious.
Yeah, that was funny.
And talking about just the lifestyles that he maintains. He travels to cover the sport 286 days out of the year away
That's
from
crazy.
his home. And I think he lives in Perth, Australia. So every race for him is pretty much a trek of 10 to 15 hours, even more. I saw a video of him going to Budapest. It took 27 hours.
That's insane.
So we hope you enjoyed the conversation. I wanted to ask Zach before we close it out and get to this convo, what did you think of it? And then let's get into the episode.
So I was in a similar boat as most people. I haven't really known much or paid much attention to F1, but after watching this, it does make me really want to, I guess, get into it a little bit more. I've been resistant to watching the Netflix series, but after seeing this, I kind of like to hear a little bit of the stories and everything going on behind the scenes. So I am actually looking forward to kind of jumping into the world of F1 over the next few weeks.
Excellent. Well, I know you'll enjoy it like Zach did, like I did, hosting this particular interview. And let us know what you think. Email us, and don't forget to subscribe and rate the show, please. It helps us get out there. So thank you and enjoy the episode. All right, Kim, thank you for taking the time. We're joined with Kim Illman, an accredited F1 photographer. In my opinion, the most well-known F1 photographer, because he's the only one that I know. But just to give a little background who Kim is, myself, my dad, my sister, and me all got hooked on F1 earlier this year through the Netflix series, the Drive to Survive. And prior to that, we had never, myself personally, I'm a sports junkie, but F1 was never something that I personally watched. And so we got into the Netflix series, and then took this year as our first year actually watching it together. And then in between races, we were kind of like addicts looking for some content to binge on. And we found Kim's content on YouTube. And for anyone listening now, we highly encourage you to subscribe to it. It's great stuff. Follow him on Instagram, and he'll plug it at the end of our little talk here. But Kim, thanks for joining.
It's a pleasure. I'm joining you from Santa Monica.
You getting ready for the Austin track? Is that this Sunday?
It is.
Right.
Yeah, we start on Thursday, media day, and then there's 3 full days of on-track stuff. And then I fly out to Mexico next week for the Mexican race.
Very cool. Very cool. As you can see, I kind of have my allegiance here. I put the hats in position. I got the Mercedes caps here.
Mhm.
So putting my allegiance right there, plain stated. For those listening, can you give like a quick rundown of who you are and what you do? Kind of like a little intro.
Yeah, I'm well versed to do that. I'm an Australian, live in Perth, and in 2016 I went to the final race of the year in Abu Dhabi as a Red Bull paying guest, and I got down the garage and I was listening to Daniel Ricciardo talk to his engineers, and I thought, oh, this is great. This is really an interesting sort of sport that I'd followed, but I wasn't by any means a fan. And I have an audio production company called Messages on Hold in Perth, and it does pretty well and runs nicely without me. And in the previous 3 or 4 years, I'd spent a lot of time in Africa photographing wildlife. I did a book, and the National Geographic picked it up for Germany. And I perhaps thought I'd had enough of that, and what'll I do next? And I thought, well, let's see if I can get accredited for F1. So I put to them somewhat of an application saying I think I could do this for the sport. And initially I thought, maybe I'll just do a season. And I got accredited for testing, and I loved it. And so I got accredited for the first race in Melbourne, second race in Bahrain, third race in China. And I was speaking to some guys there, and they just had a run-in with someone else, I think, and they were needing an extra shooter. And I was there, and I said, can I help you? And Mark said, yeah, do you want to shoot for us? I said, yeah, okay, done. So that's how I effectively got into this sport. And now I've come to a stage where I go to every race. I photograph it, but I also do videos on it. I then put those videos onto TikTok. I do Instagram, Twitter a little bit, and Facebook. So I've got an audience of about 870,000 people all around the world. And
I'm one of them.
So my take is a little bit more interesting, I think, than most. Well, different perhaps, because most photographers who shoot F1 are in it for the cars. Well, I'm not a great car photographer. I'm okay, but it's not my forte. So I tend to focus on the people and the stories behind the sport. And I think that's why I've perhaps garnered such an audience, is because no one was doing that. I am doing it, and I'm essentially a marketer. So I know how to market stuff and promote it, and yeah, it's gone pretty well.
That's really cool. And it's interesting that you say that you focus on the stories, because I think that's what has made the sport blow up here. F1, as you know, the US before was really, or maybe you don't know, NASCAR was probably the predominant racing series that you would watch here. But I'm from Miami, pretty much 15 minutes from the city. And F1 has just exploded. I mean, my friends who I've talked to my entire life are talking about F1. They're Red Bull fanatics. They're wearing the cap, the merch, everything. And really, I think what got them into it is the story side of seeing who are the people in the paddock, who are the drivers, the team principals, the stories behind them. And I think it's helped elevate the sport, at least from an audience perspective. I was wondering if you could speak to that from your side. How have you seen it change from when you first got into the sport as a photographer and till now?
Well, I'm acutely aware of the American influence here, because this year, last year, I started selling these custom photo books, printed on demand, and half of the sales come from America. Half. About 25% from Australia. In Europe, 7%.
Wow.
Maybe 7 to 10%, which is phenomenal, because that is F1's home, Europe.
Yeah.
And now this year I've just started collaborating with drivers, and we're doing signed prints. And once again, 50% of the orders come from the US, a little bit from Canada. So look, I can't tell you what that was like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, because I wasn't selling that sort of stuff now. But what I can tell you is it is becoming increasingly harder to get clean shots of drivers in the paddock now, because it's opened back up again, and the appetite for selfies amongst punters is enormous.
Yeah.
And the drivers are now realizing that a lot of their privacy is gone, whereas previously they could walk around the paddock. They just can't. And they tend to spend maybe too much of their time locked away because they simply can't get out and simply have a chat with another driver because the fans are on top. So yeah, that series has done wonders for the sport, and it's been a great thing to drive the value of Liberty Media's asset, but it has meant that drivers now are treated like rock stars. Not all of them. Down the bottom end, the Lance Strolls and Nicholas Latifi, nothing like the response that a Lando or a Max or a Lewis will get.
And, have you seen also, I was going to ask you when you said you went through the testing period to be the photographer for F1, for people who are not aware, how selective is that process? Like how many F1 photographers are there on the circuit?
Well, I should state that we're accredited by FIA is actually the accreditation body, but we don't get paid by Formula One. Formula One has a contract for photography, and that I think is with Getty Images, so they put their work that way. But there would be, in fact, I know that there are 73 permanently accredited photographers on their books. Permanently means that they've done at least 14 races in the previous year, and that allows us to get a pass that we simply swipe into any race we want to go to. We don't have to advise them or apply for that race. We just go to any race we want. And assuming you do 14 races this year, you get 14 next year. How do you get one of those passes? I can't tell you what FIA accreditation is now. It was maybe a little bit different when I joined, but certainly if you went onto their website, you'd find out. I got to tell you, I would get 7 to 10 email a week saying, I'd like to be an intern. How do I get a job in F1? There are no jobs, really. Yeah. There are very few people that get paid to photograph. Most people, most photographers have to find their own business model. They have to get their own clients, have to pay their own travel, their own insurance, get their own kit. There are a few paid photographers, but they are few and far between.
So then that's news to me. So then the payment structure really works that there's photography companies who are licensed, or they have a deal like with Getty Images, and maybe there's a photographer team associated with Getty Images that's paid by Getty, right? And then as a photographer yourself, you got to come self-prepped with your kit, with your everything that you're bringing to the track. It's not their responsibility to provide that for you.
You have to get there. You have to pay for everything, and you can't believe what has to be paid for. There's a whole lot of stuff on top of travel and accommodation. But once you're there, you have pretty much everyone has the same rights to shoot. There's only a little bit of toing and froing in terms of if at the first corner tower it's small, well then only the major agencies get them, which is fair enough because they want the greatest reach out of the accreditation they're giving. But I've shown, I think, that there is a new media. Well, certainly magazines in the old days, they used to be quite popular. But today, I've got 20, 30 times the reach that a magazine would have. So I think F1 is really coming to grips with that now, that social media and the internet is the way of the future.
Yeah. When did you decide on your F1 journey to venture into the world of YouTubing and creating pretty much behind the scenes look at what it's like, the life in the paddock?
Halfway through 2018, having hated Instagram, I decided I should perhaps give that a crack. And I had, I think, about 2,500 followers then. And I have gone into it with some verve, and I think we're up to 360 or 80,000, I can't remember at the moment. But YouTube was, I'm guessing 2 years ago, was it? 2 or 3 years ago, my eldest son was just starting to play around with it. And he said, oh, you should do that for F1. And I said, okay. So I did a video and I showed it to him, and he said, well, you can't put that up. And I said, why? He said, well, that's disgraceful. Oh, I spent 6 hours on that. I said, no, you can't put that up. So I had to stop that and start again. And since that day to what I'm doing now, there's a marked difference. But still, the content is roughly the same. It's just me talking about stuff that I know about, and that's typically not cars and aerodynamics or anything. But what I have come to realize is that people just want the stories. They want to hear what happened. They want to hear that Lando and Carlos did this in the car park, because they can't get to the car park. And there are oftentimes there'll only be me around these certain events, and I'm the only one with access to it. And I never take that for granted. It's quite a privilege.
Yeah, it's you have unique access, and that's why I think your content stands out, because I personally have not seen another F1 media member, content creator creating the type of content you're doing. Which, just to give an example, could be anything from what the drivers drove up to at the Grand Prix, or Carlos Sainz escaping his vehicle on fire, which was one of the first videos I saw of yours that was terrific, because it gave a look at what was actually happening with what you just said. That I think it was you who said this, which was the safety attendant tried to put the little wedge underneath the tire. It didn't stick. The gloves were kind of slow to come on. Like those kind of observations for somebody new to the sport. It's both teaching us as the viewers a little bit more about F1 and how things typically operate, and also showing us like a really close behind the scenes look, which is really cool.
The thing is, we can't video. As a photographer, we are absolutely prohibited from taking any vision or audio. So all I do is photograph and then use those photographs in my videos. It's not ideal, but we just don't have any other option. Otherwise, we'd all be competing with television broadcasters who are paying huge money.
Yeah. Do you have a content strategy on a yearly basis with your videos? Like, do you know, for example, this year I've noticed like a trend where you're doing what the drivers are showing up to. Sometimes what they're wearing, what car they're driving, or vehicle they're driving with to the track. Your airline videos, which are some of my favorites actually, that just kind of shows what you have to go through to leave Australia, because it seems like a trek every time you're leaving your home country.
A heck of a long way to almost every race except Melbourne and Singapore. In terms of my content, what the drivers drove, I fell into, because in 2021 we couldn't access the paddock. So we were stuck in the car park watching drivers come in. That was our only shots. And then I did a couple of videos on what they were driving and found there was this huge appetite for it. So I thought, well, I'm not going to stop doing that, because it's an easy video to do in certain respects. Wives and Girlfriends, absolute winner, over 1 million views for virtually every one of those videos. Then I picked the people who are important, and people like Angela Cullen, Lewis's trainer, a physio. She's consistently in my top videos each year. Britta Ruska, Seb's effectively manager. She's very popular. I do videos on that too. Some people get crazy up in arms. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about the women. They get all offended because all the time they just want to see the guys and the drivers. I think, no, you can see them everywhere. So I don't mind shining the spotlight on the females in the paddock. And also I do a thing each week called Women of the Paddock on Instagram, Men of the Paddock, Shoes of the Paddock, handbags of the paddock. One of the guys said, you should do handbags. And sure enough, it's an absolute winner. And often at the track, we'll be standing around for hours waiting for drivers to come in. And I'll be looking for stuff to shoot. And I'll think, oh, he's got a nice pair of trainers. I'll take a photo of that. Or she's got a Gucci handbag. Let's take a photo of that. And once again, they're relatively easy content for me to post in the off week.
Are any of the drivers ever coming up to you and whether they see the type of content you're making, or, hey, can you get a shot of this and share it with us? Has that ever happened? Or do you have any stories of stuff like that?
Yeah. A lot of times they'll say, oh, look at this new sponsorship deal with this. Can you do us a favor here? Or they'll say, oh, don't put that picture up of me there. I just realized I had the wrong watch on. That happened in the last race. But I was already one step ahead of that driver, and I blurred that watch photo as a favor to him. But yeah, I work with these people every single week, and you can't make enemies of them. Yeah. Occasionally you'll overstep the boundary and you'll think that's a good photo, and they'll ping you a note and say, oh, that's a shocking photo, Kim, can you take it down?
Any memorable experience with a particular driver that they asked you for like a fun photo or something that stands out to you?
Yeah, Nico Hulkenberg's always good.
Yeah.
One day he said, take a photo of this, Kim. I said, what? Take a photo. I'm eating a chocolate. All right, take it. Why is that important? Oh, no, I'm just eating a chocolate. Okay. He's a funny bugger, Nico, and I think there's a 50-50 chance he'll be back with us next year in that Haas seat.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
Is Mick? Do you think Mick has changing teams or losing the seat?
No, I don't think he'll be changing teams. Yeah. I think he'll be out. If
Wow.
he doesn't get the Haas seat, he'll be out. And I think Logan Sargent is almost guaranteed. As long as he gets his points, I think he'll be at Williams. And that's the grid finally done.
There's so few seats that it's like, it's so cutthroat, just the sport in general. That's why I think the stories resonate even more, because you get attached to the drivers, and then you're like, I mean, how many seats are there? 20 seats, right? Crazy. Can you walk us through your average work week as a photographer for F1, and and even take us through maybe the video content, like when you land and what's going on from then on out?
All right, I'll step it from a Thursday. So I'll get to the track in Austin, and I'll do from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I will photograph driver arrivals, maybe some press conference portrait stuff, just general goings on. And then Friday, it'll be probably 8 to 8 again. Depends on, I've got a couple of clients that I do stuff every second race for, and that's probably 2 hours extra. But most of the time, it's just waiting for drivers to arrive, doing the track stuff, going back in and editing, going out and doing the next track session, going back and editing, going out again, seeing what's happening late in the afternoon, evening, and then editing again, and then going back to the hotel and showering, perhaps having a meal and go to bed. Saturday will be a little bit easier than Friday. Friday's our hardest day. But Saturday gets me some of the best stuff, because after quali, there's a real buzz in the paddock, and there's often drivers doing interviews, and they'll wander backwards and forwards. And then on Sunday, anywhere from about probably 6 hours prior to the start of race, I'll arrive, I'll shoot driver arrivals, go back to the media centre and edit. Then I'll go back and do the drivers parade, quick edit, 20 minutes in the media centre, go and do the race. And then pretty much stay out. I won't go back to the media centre straight after the race, because that's where I get all the good stuff. Almost all the photographers go back, but I hang out, because that's when you get people in tears and people joyful and anger and all sorts of stuff. And then I'll finish up on a Sunday night late. And if it's a back-to-back race, I'll go back to my hotel. Monday I'll fly. I'll have to do a video on Monday too, probably what the drivers drove. Tuesday I might do another video, and I do probably 80% of each video. I script it, I record it, I do the timeline, throw in the photos roughly, and I send it all back to Perth, and I have a video editor there that tidies it up. So I'll normally do two videos between a back-to-back race. Yeah, it never stops. It never stops.
I'm surprised you said Friday is the most hectic day of the three.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's a long day. The drivers don't have to be in at a certain time, so they can stagger their. Well, they do have to be in by a certain time, but it's a long day, because you've got 2 on-track sessions, and it's the hardest day.
I know we're limited on time. We got it's a half hour, so then we got 10 minutes. All right, cool. All right, thanks, Kim. I wanted to know, what is you've been doing this since 2018, correct?
Yeah, 17 was my first year.
What are some of the most memorable moments you've experienced in the paddock? Because for most people, they'll never step foot in the paddock. But historically, what are some of the moments that first came to your mind right when I asked that question for you?
Gunther Steiner coming towards me, looking straight down into my lens, unexpected in Silverstone last year. Nico Hulkenberg has always been great for me, because he always pulls funny faces. Often on track walks, you'll have a chat with the driver, and he'll tell you some interesting stuff that you can't repeat because we're away from everyone else. Some fascinating stuff, and I says I can't repeat it, but it's information that I go, oh, you shouldn't be telling me that.
Race strategy stuff, or
all sorts. Yeah. I can tell you, I was in a car one night with Pierre Gasly, and we were going to a function. It was just him and me chatting. And I said, oh, can you ring my son? He goes, yeah, sure, because he's met my son before. Yeah. So I give him the phone, and it's ringing, and he says, don't you want me to FaceTime? I said, oh, yeah, good idea. So I get the phone back, FaceTime him, I hand it to him. And Jace is just getting out of the shower in Perth, because it's early morning. He's naked, and he's got wet hair, and hi, Dad. Oh, hi, hello, Pierre. So that was a lovely thing. But, yeah, look, there's a lot of stuff, and over 5 years, you'd expect there to be plenty of stories, but I just can't put my finger on too many of them at the moment.
I don't know if this is a taboo question to ask or not, but do you have a team or driver you secretly root for that you're willing to share?
Look, I like to go for anyone who's not winning a lot. So
Yeah.
if it's Lewis winning, I want Max to win. If Max is winning, I want someone else to win.
Yeah.
I want, like I love to win. Esteban had his win. Pierre had his win. Checo, Carlos, they're great moments. Look, I don't have a particular team that I follow or a driver. Look, I think the best cars to photograph are the Ferraris, the McLarens, and the AlphaTauris. I get on well with Pierre and Lando and Daniel and Charles.
My sister will be happy to hear that about Ferrari and Charles, because she's the Ferrari diehard in the family.
He's a beautiful guy. He is a real class act. In fact, they're all classy people. There's not anyone that's rude. Lewis, you don't get to speak to because he's so busy, but he's never rude. And oftentimes, say, excuse me, Kim, and I'll be in his way and he'll move me aside. But they're all really classy guys. Some are quiet, like Checo doesn't tend to say much, and Nicholas Latifi's just a lovely guy, but you don't hear from him. Lance, hard to get a rise out of Lance. I got a few photos of him smiling, but few and far between. Seb's hilarious. Look, Esteban's a really down-to-earth sort of fella. Good bunch of people. And Nick DeVries, I've just done a signed driver print with him.
Yep.
Surprised the hell out of me. There's been a huge appetite for those.
It shines through that they're all class acts. I mean, it shines through every time there's a speaking opportunity for any of those guys. It's clear that they're all just top-notch people. At least that's what comes off, and I'm happy to hear that that's been your experience.
They have to be, because they're so under scrutiny. And they always remind me of young golf pros. And the young golf pros never know who's going to be sponsoring them, and they're going to be nice to everyone because it's just good for business. And same with these guys.
Well, on the topic of the drivers, I have like an idea that came to me as I was prepping some questions here. If you're familiar with yearbooks, like high school yearbooks, there's superlatives on there. I was wondering we go through a few categories of guys that jump off the page for each category.
Okay.
All right. And you can add team principals in here too if you want.
Right.
All right. Who would you say is the class clown of the paddock drivers, the comedian in the bunch?
Daniel.
This is kind of vague, but best personality, and just in terms of like maybe the most likable guy in the paddock that everybody gets on. Who? Lando. Okay. Most likely to run for public office, president, whatever leadership position.
Oh, I've got all the drivers' names up here. Probably Seb.
Okay. I've heard that one before too. Most thoughtful in terms of like, they'll say something that I didn't think they were being that observant.
Charles.
Most popular on the paddock?
Well, when you say popular, Lewis is the number one. He's the big.
In terms of, I guess that's the easy answer there. I was thinking like more of, I should have figured it would have been Lewis, like right off the bat.
Seb is probably the most likable guy. Everyone loves Seb, and if not Seb, it would have been Kimi last year. As grumpy as Kimi is, Kimi is liked.
I love watching Kimi's outbursts, like his highlight outbursts on YouTube. They're the best. How about team principals? Any stand out in those categories for you?
Yeah, I love Toto. I get on very well with Toto. Gunter, I like a lot. Andreas Seidel, cool guy. Franz Tost always smiles for me. I don't do much with the rest of them. They all seem pretty good.
Perfect. And in terms of races, is there a specific race or place you like to travel to that you look forward to throughout the year, like more than maybe some of the others? It could be more than one too, by the way.
Photographically, Monaco is my absolute favorite, but I like Budapest for its ambience in the city and the absolute buzz and the people and that city nightlife scene. Phenomenal. Suzuka for the fans. Just the accommodation is appalling around. Well, not appalling. It's very local. Which is different to what we get most other places. But yeah, they're the ones that stand out.
Cool. Yeah, because I was just watching one about your perfect track, and you had a combination of the environment, very, very atmospheric, but something that's not a city circuit. So I can see like, I think it's Hungary that has like the very picturesque, like there's a lot of forest around, and then you have like
Austria.
Austria.
Austria has, oh no, and also Hungary has one section where you get this beautiful shot with trees in the background.
Mhm.
Yeah, but they are few and far between to get shots like that. There's a great shot in Suzuka where you can have the background just white out, back and front, if it's bright enough sun.
Yeah.
But other times, city tracks, we just get shitty bloody fencing everywhere and it looks awful. And signage. We avoid signage wherever possible.
Because you can't use it in a photo?
No, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
You want a clean photo. Sometimes you want a clean. Most of the times you want a clean photo.
I do know, and we have this in common, although my watch collection pales in comparison to yours. You did catch a couple of really cool shots with, I forget which car it was, but with the Rolex sign behind it, the banner that's on.
Yeah, everybody does that. Sometimes you just get lucky and the frame that comes out has halo on Lewis's head. But I did get Valtteri sitting at one race this year underneath the Rolex sign, and we just got him to move a smidge, and then we moved, and we got this perfect shot of him with a crown on his head. And that was one of my best pics on Instagram.
I didn't actually write this down as a prepared question, but what has been your best performing post or content this year on Instagram?
This year, Joe's crash was my ever post.
Wow.
I've got, what did I say, 360 or 80,000 followers, and that one did 80,000 likes. But it wasn't my biggest reach. My biggest reach was Women of the Paddock from, can't remember, where was it? This young lady, Maria, who is the wife of the major sponsor, one of the major sponsors of Ferrari.
Interesting.
Yeah, she had this white jumpsuit on that was a knockout. 1.1 million reach on that post. So there you go. They say, women don't sell, but they sell.
Your photos of Joe in that crash, that kind of takes me to a question I had about what's your strategy of positioning yourself around the track? Was that just complete chance that you happened to be there at that moment?
Yeah, often. Well, being frank with you, I tend to go to spots where I can get back to the paddock easily because most of my stuff's in the paddock. So if I'm going to shoot a race, I don't want to be like in Singapore. There's some places where you have to go out there 45 minutes before the start of the event, and you won't get back until a half an hour after. I won't be there. I just can't do it. So I'll go to accessible places around the start finishing line. Because I do the grid and I'm on the grid when the drivers are getting into the car, it has to be somewhere I can reach, with a 10-minute walk. So that was first corner at Silverstone, and it was amazing opportunity to capture that. There was lots of photographers there, so my pictures weren't anything special. But
they're fantastic pictures, so you don't downplay them. They're great. But
they were up quick. There's a lot to be said for being first to market.
So you're traversing everywhere pretty much walking. You're not getting shuttled around.
Well, most of the tracks don't have shuttles, although Austin does, thankfully, but they drive just quicker than walking speed, which is good. You can never sit down, but we wish they'd go about 3 times the speed, because you spend a lot of time, especially during a race. You might spend 8 laps sitting in this media shuttle getting back to Parc Ferme.
And do you have a strategy like, hey, I'm going to be in the first corner and then I want to get some straightaway shots and then
I'll have a strategy sometimes. And sometimes I'll start off and I'll go, I'm not going to do that. I'll do something else. Occasionally I'll post on Instagram, here's what I'm going to do. Bang, bang, bang. People love that. But sometimes I'm just not that well organized.
Now that your content's taken off in terms of like the popularity and reach you get, are you independent now as a photographer, or are you still working under a company, or do you have?
I've always been a freelancer. Always.
Okay.
Except that first year where I earned some income from somebody else, but it was never enough to cover my costs.
Yeah. Interesting. I had a couple of others, and then I have like my last segment here, which
2 minutes, because I've got to go and pick up some prints.
Perfect. That's just about the right amount of time. You travel most of the year. What's kind of advice would you give to photographers, production professionals to maintain that lifestyle like effectively, or like a way to handle it well? Because I've heard you call it, sometimes it can be a grind being constantly traveling the amount that you have to.
A lot of people say, how do you handle jet lag? I said, well, I go business class and I normally get a lie flat seat on a long flight. And it means that I can roll up normally and be ready to go. Except yesterday when I came from Japan, that's a bugger coming to the US. It's just a hard thing on the body. So yesterday afternoon, I had to have 3 hours sleep in the afternoon and I was up at 3 a.m. But travel comfortably. What else? Carry sleeping tablets, because the worst thing is when you can't get to sleep. And sometimes I'll wake at 3 a.m. and I've got a big day at the track and I'll just take one straight away because I can't afford to sit around for an hour and a half trying to sleep and then it's too late to take one.
Perfect. All right, let's get to the last segment here. I appreciate you extending the time. This is, if you've ever seen the show Inside the Actor Studio, he ends it with like a 10-question kind of Rorschach test sort of thing. But we have more of a business twist to it here because this is a business show. All right. Kim Millman, what is your favorite word?
I use so a lot when I speak and I've got to get rid of it. But apart from that, favorite word, I can't think of anything that comes to mind.
You'll be the first person who can't pick a word here.
Poindexter.
Poindexter. All right. Your least favorite word? You should have seen that one coming.
Like. Americans using like.
Don't come to Miami. You'll hear it everywhere. What gets you going or motivates you?
Growing my business. It's always a focus on how can I do more, not how can I do less.
What puts you off?
People who say no. I just don't listen to them and go somewhere else.
What sound or noise do you love? Or lack of sound?
Noise. There's a certain noise on my keyboard when I make a sale, not on my laptop when I make a sale. That's quite nice.
And the reverse, which one do you hate?
The noise we go in through the swipe gates, do 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 do. You hear it so often, especially when we're photographing around that area, that sometimes you become numb to it, but other times I've had enough.
If you weren't an F1 photographer or a full-time photographer, what other profession would you like to attempt?
Well, I've got a very successful business in Australia. If I wasn't doing this, I'd just go back to that and focus on that. So, which is audio production.
Okay.
Unless it's on hold. But this is my dream job. So there is no better job for me than this. It's total immersion. It just gives me everything I want.
What is a bit of advice or wisdom you wish you knew before starting your own company or companies?
Well, if I've talked about F1, I would have gone into the photo books a lot earlier and the signed prints because they have been a real a winner. There's clearly an appetite for them, and I should have done it earlier. But maybe
something a little more practical in terms of just a lesson you've learned over the years, because you're experienced and successful in multiple businesses now. Maybe something that you had to learn the hard way.
I don't think you're good at everything. Know what you are good at and just multiply that.
Thank you. And last thing, what do you want your legacy to be, or your obituary to say about you?
He did what people said he couldn't.
Love it. Thank you, Kim, so much for this time in the conversation. And I know everybody will enjoy listening to this. And thank you for allowing me to turn this into an interview in very impromptu way. So
my pleasure. And I'm now going to go and pick up some prints I had printed here in LA that I'm taking to Austin to get signed by Magnuson and Jackie Stewart.
Excellent. And by the way, I think it's just starting in terms of the storytelling being such a huge thing for F1 and sports in general. I haven't told you anything background about me, but I have a production company and I direct videos and stuff like that. And I worked with Wilson Tennis this year, and they dove into what F1 has been doing, which is that more story-based, give you a deeper look at the tennis players behind outside of the court? What are their passions off the court? And that's the stuff I think that you capture. And thank you for doing that, because honestly, without your content, I would know a lot less about F1 and the dynamics that go on within there. So thank you. Keep up the good work. And I hope you enjoy your time in the States. And I hope you don't overpay for steak over here.
If I do, I'll enjoy it. All right, mate.
Hey, thank you, Kim.
Thank you for listening to the Soapbox Business Show. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. You can visit us on YouTube, or you can take a look at our website at soapbox.house, where you'll find a whole bunch of links to this podcast and other podcasts in our network. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.